Amidst the darkness and unsolved mysteries of World War II, there's one story that stands out. A story of an entire unit vanishing without a trace. A routine reconnaissance mission that turned into a chilling mystery that still haunts the pages of history. Today, we'll dive into the eerie tale of Phantom Battalion, the Vanished Patrol. Welcome to Wartime Shadows, where we bring you the most haunting, supernatural, and mysterious tales from the darkest moments in war history. Was it enemy sabotage or something far darker that caused an entire battalion to disappear? Join us as we uncover the details of a story shrouded in secrecy, a story that still leaves more questions than answers. The mission begins, December 1944. The relentless winter had enveloped the forests along the German-Belgian border in a ghostly blanket of frost and mist. This was the Hurtgen Forest, notorious among the Allies for its brutal fighting conditions. A dense labyrinth of towering pines and twisted undergrowth, cloaked in endless fog. Here, visibility was often just a few feet, and silence was an oppressive companion, broken only occasionally by distant, ominous echoes of artillery. Battalion 409, an elite reconnaissance unit composed of seasoned soldiers hardened by months of combat, had been summoned for a mission shrouded in secrecy. Their objective: infiltrate enemy lines deep into the mysterious heart of the Hurtgen Forest to gather critical intelligence on German positions and troop movements. Little did these battle-weary men know, the forest held secrets darker and more chilling than any wartime horror they had yet encountered. At dawn, the patrol, comprising 20 soldiers led by Captain James Holland, moved silently through the frozen landscape. Holland was a respected leader, a veteran of the North African and Italian campaigns, admired by his men for his unflappable courage and sharp instincts. Yet today, even he felt an unsettling heaviness, as if unseen eyes watched from the murky shadows behind the trees. The fog thickened as they advanced, muffling the sound of their footsteps and causing an unsettling isolation. Radio communication became sporadic and unreliable, crackling with static before fading entirely. Sergeant Tom Grayson, responsible for the patrol's communications, tapped his radio nervously, exchanging wary glances with the captain. The forest, it seemed, was determined to cut them off entirely from the outside world. As they pressed deeper into enemy territory, their unease grew. Each soldier had seen the brutal face of war countless times before, yet something here felt inexplicably different, almost as if the land itself resented their intrusion. The trees appeared to close in tighter, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Occasionally, eerie silhouettes seemed to flit through the mist, vanishing as suddenly as they appeared, leaving soldiers whispering anxiously about shadows and tricks of the mind. Captain Holland called a brief halt, carefully examining the tattered map they'd been provided, a rough sketch marked with vague symbols and cryptic notes. He frowned, sensing something was not right. Landmarks described on the map seemed altered or missing entirely, as if the forest itself had shifted overnight. "Stay sharp," Holland warned softly, trying to mask his concern. His soldiers nodded quietly, gripping their weapons tightly, eyes straining into the foggy void ahead. Unbeknownst to them, this routine reconnaissance mission had already begun transforming into something far more sinister. A chilling encounter destined to become one of the most baffling and haunting mysteries of the Second World War. With a final glance behind, the battalion silently moved forward, deeper into the heart of the forest, vanishing gradually into the swirling mist, never suspecting that the real enemy was not waiting for them in trenches or bunkers, but hidden within the very shadows around them. Eerie signs, as Battalion 409 continued deeper into the haunting embrace of the Hurtgen Forest, the oppressive silence was broken only by their muffled footsteps and distant, unexplained noises that occasionally echoed from somewhere hidden in the fog. Each soldier remained alert, nerves stretched thin by the unsettling atmosphere. It wasn't long before they stumbled upon the first disturbing discovery, a hastily abandoned German outpost. The soldiers approached cautiously, weapons raised and eyes scanning every shadowed corner. Wooden structures stood silent and empty, their doors creaking open in the cold wind. Rusted cans, scattered personal items, and abandoned equipment lay strewn carelessly around, as if the occupants had simply vanished mid-action. Captain Holland signaled for the men to spread out and investigate. Private Matthew Riley knelt down, picking up a German helmet that had been left discarded on the frozen ground, coated in a thin sheen of ice. Its leather lining was torn, but oddly, there was no trace of blood or signs of combat. It was as if the helmet's owner had simply disappeared into thin air. Nearby, Sergeant Grayson found a makeshift communications post, its radio smashed deliberately, wires dangling like lifeless limbs. The damage appeared intentional, hurried, as if someone had desperately tried to silence an unknown threat or a terrible secret. The most chilling discovery was made by Captain Holland himself. Inside one of the abandoned tents, he unearthed a tattered map lying crumpled on a table, stained with blood that had long since dried. Markings on the map indicated specific locations deeper within the forest, locations the patrol was scheduled to investigate. The markings were accompanied by scribbled notes, barely legible but deeply ominous. "See Biobactenes, they are watching us." A shiver ran down Holland's spine as he read the cryptic message aloud, and he noticed his soldiers exchanging uneasy glances. The realization was clear. Whatever had happened here, whoever had occupied this outpost, had been gripped by terror. With daylight fading rapidly, Captain Holland ordered the patrol to regroup. A tangible dread filled the air as the soldiers quietly processed the grim clues left behind. Each man felt the heavy weight of uncertainty, the creeping sense that something unnatural lurked within the forest, an unseen menace waiting patiently in the shadows. As Battalion 409 resumed their cautious advance, no one spoke, allowed the questions haunting their thoughts. Why had the enemy abandoned their positions without a fight? What invisible threat could have prompted them to leave behind valuable supplies and maps so abruptly? Deep within the shroud of mist and shadows, the forest seemed to whisper its secrets mockingly, beckoning the soldiers onward toward an unknown fate. Strange encounters. As nightfall descended upon the forest, the atmosphere shifted from unsettling to deeply sinister. Darkness seeped into every corner of the dense woods, wrapping Battalion 409 in a cloak of impenetrable blackness. Only faint beams from their flashlights pierced the veil, barely illuminating the twisted trunks and branches around them. With limited visibility, each soldier felt vulnerable, isolated even among comrades. The oppressive silence grew heavier, periodically punctuated by inexplicable sounds, the distant snapping of branches, rustling leaves, or soft, indistinct whispers carried on the icy wind. Each sound caused soldiers to whirl around sharply, weapons raised, hearts racing with adrenaline. Private Riley suddenly froze, eyes wide with alarm. He motioned urgently toward a dense cluster of trees. "Did anyone else see that?" he whispered tensely, his voice edged with panic. Sergeant Grayson shone his flashlight in that direction, revealing nothing but silent, shadowed trees. Captain Holland approached carefully, sensing his men's growing anxiety. "Stay calm," he said firmly, though inwardly he felt just as disturbed. "Remember your training." Yet even as he spoke, Holland himself glimpsed a shadowy figure moving swiftly between the trees, vanishing instantly into the gloom. He blinked, questioning whether it had been a trick of the light or something far more unnerving. Behind him, he could hear murmurs among the soldiers, some nervously clutching their rifles closer. Sergeant Grayson cursed under his breath as his radio crackled again. Garbled voices intermingled with static, unintelligible but undeniably human. Despite repeated attempts to clarify the transmission, the voices only grew more distorted, eventually dissolving into haunting, indistinct murmurs before fading completely into silence. The feeling of being watched intensified, a nearly palpable presence lurking just out of sight. Occasionally, Soldiers reported glimpsing shadowy forms darting swiftly through the trees, or faces peering momentarily from behind tree trunks, only to disappear before they could be identified clearly. The tension continued to mount, the men's minds beginning to fray under the psychological pressure of the unknown. Captain Holland recognized the danger of panic taking hold. He ordered a brief halt to regain control, instructing the soldiers to gather closer. "Whatever we're experiencing," he reminded them sternly, "we'll face it together. Keep your heads clear." Yet, despite his brave words, doubt gnawed at him. Each strange occurrence challenged his rational mind, tempting him to believe that perhaps something inexplicable truly haunted the shadows of the Hurtgen forest. Battalion 409 pressed onward through the chilling darkness, their nerves strained to breaking point, unaware that the night's eerie encounters were merely the beginning of their terrifying ordeal. The village that shouldn't exist. Hours passed slowly, each moment stretching into eternity as Battalion 409 navigated through the endless maze of trees. Just as fatigue and despair threatened to overcome them, a clearing emerged unexpectedly from the fog. The soldiers halted abruptly, disbelief painted across their exhausted faces. Ahead lay a small village, one that did not appear on any maps or reconnaissance reports. A cluster of simple, timber-framed buildings stood eerily quiet, their rooftops lightly dusted with snow. Despite the apparent emptiness, small fires flickered in a few windows, casting soft, warm glows that contrasted sharply with the biting cold and oppressive darkness around them. Captain Holland cautiously signaled his men to advance, maintaining silence and vigilance. As they moved closer, confusion deepened. There were no signs of inhabitants, no voices, no footsteps, yet everything about the village seemed unnaturally maintained. Smoke rose lazily from chimneys, suggesting life, yet no occupants could be seen or heard. Private Riley, driven by curiosity and unease, peered into one of the homes. Inside, the scene appeared disturbingly normal. A table set for dinner, steaming cups of tea still hot, as though the villagers had vanished only moments before their arrival. Riley backed away, unsettled and alarmed, relaying his discovery quietly to the others. Captain Holland moved forward slowly, stopping at a small chapel at the center of the village. Its wooden doors swung loosely in the wind, creaking ominously. Holland pushed the door open further, revealing rows of empty pews and candles flickering quietly at the altar, their wax fresh and recently lit. A sense of dread washed over him, amplified by the silence, so profound it seemed deafening. Sergeant Grayson discovered footsteps in the snow nearby, footprints made only minutes earlier, trailing off into the dense forest beyond. But strangely, no prints indicated that anyone had entered the village, only departed. The soldiers exchanged anxious glances, the bizarre discoveries undermining their already strained nerves. They were seasoned combat veterans, trained for harsh realities, yet nothing in their experience prepared them for this unsettling paradox. A village existing quietly, impossibly, deep behind enemy lines, untouched by war, yet absent of human life. As darkness intensified, Captain Holland ordered his men to quickly set up a temporary perimeter around the village. Despite their fatigue, the soldiers worked quietly and urgently, driven by instinctual fear. Each man felt profoundly vulnerable, exposed in an unfamiliar place that seemed caught between worlds. The night grew colder, the whispers of the forest louder and closer, as if mocking their desperate search for rational explanations. Battalion 409 waited anxiously, feeling as though invisible eyes were watching them from every shadow, waiting silently for the moment to reveal their dreadful purpose. Vanishing soldiers. Night deepened, wrapping Battalion 409 in a shroud of frigid darkness, punctuated only by faint moonlight filtering through misty clouds. Exhausted soldiers took turns on watch, maintaining vigilant eyes despite overwhelming fatigue. The village felt like a sinister enigma, heightening their senses and increasing paranoia. It was during Private Riley's shift, as dawn neared, that the disturbing reality unfolded. Checking on the soldiers stationed at the northern perimeter, Riley found their positions abandoned. Rifles lay discarded on the frozen ground, helmets toppled carelessly beside them. He urgently whispered their names, but no reply came. Only silence met his frantic calls. Captain Holland was quickly awakened by Riley's alarm. Hastily assembling the remaining men, he ordered an immediate search, desperately hoping his soldiers had simply wandered briefly away from their posts. But with each passing minute, hope faded to dread. Tracks left in the snow showed no struggle, no violence, just abrupt footprints ending mysteriously, as though the missing soldiers had stepped directly from existence into nothingness. Fear seeped through the ranks, undermining discipline and unity. Soldiers murmured anxious theories, whispers of supernatural forces echoing through their conversations. Captain Holland could sense panic simmering beneath the surface, threatening to erupt and fracture his patrol irreparably. "Keep calm," he commanded forcefully, despite his own growing unease. "We won't lose our heads. Stay together, stay focused." Yet even as Holland spoke, the forest seemed to press closer, its shadows lengthening ominously, mocking his efforts to maintain control. Sergeant Grayson attempted once again to make radio contact, frantically adjusting the frequencies. But now the radio emitted only hollow static and distorted whispers that seemed chillingly human, a twisted mimicry of their desperate calls for help. Captain Holland, determined yet deeply unsettled, considered their increasingly dire situation. 3 soldiers had vanished without a trace, their disappearance utterly inexplicable. He realized painfully that conventional explanations were failing, leaving him forced to confront possibilities his rational mind fiercely resisted. "Nobody leaves the group from now on," he declared firmly, his voice steady but edged with tension. His soldiers nodded gravely, clinging desperately to the fragile semblance of normalcy that Holland's leadership provided. Yet privately, each man grappled with creeping despair, haunted by silent, unanswered questions. What force was silently hunting them, claiming them one by one? Was it enemy sabotage, or something infinitely darker and beyond human comprehension? As dawn slowly illuminated the eerie village, casting long shadows upon its deserted streets, Battalion 409 braced themselves for whatever awaited in the forest depths, unaware that the night's chilling disappearances were only a precursor to greater horrors yet to unfold. Whispering shadows, as the pale light of dawn struggled to pierce the oppressive fog, Battalion 409 set out once more into the haunted depths of the Hurtgen Forest. The disappearance of their comrades weighed heavily upon every soldier, sowing seeds of paranoia and dread that flourished with each step they took deeper into the woods. With weary eyes and strained nerves, soldiers began experiencing disturbing hallucinations. Figures moved at the edge of their vision, shadowy silhouettes gliding silently through the trees. Voices whispered softly from the mist, their indistinct words laced with the familiar timbre of missing comrades, calling out their names in desperate tones. Private Riley trembled visibly, his hands clutching his rifle with white-knuckled intensity. He repeatedly glanced over his shoulder, convinced he had heard the voice of a vanished friend whispering directly behind him, pleading for help. Each time he turned, he found only emptiness and silence, mocking his sanity. Captain Holland, despite his outward composure, felt himself teetering precariously on the edge of disbelief and fear. The forest seemed to distort reality itself, challenging everything he knew and understood. His men's quiet murmurs grew increasingly agitated, their eyes darting nervously into every shadow, every flicker of movement in the periphery becoming a potential threat. Sergeant Grayson, haunted by the failures of his radio, suddenly froze mid-step, staring wide-eyed at something unseen by the others. His face drained of color as he whispered hoarsely, "They're calling me. Can't you hear them? They want us to follow. Snap out of it, Sergeant." Holland commanded sharply, gripping Grayson's shoulder firmly. The sergeant blinked, confusion and fear lingering in his eyes as he slowly returned to his senses, mumbling apologies. Yet the damage had been done. The fragile morale of the group continued to fracture, each man battling his private nightmare. Driven nearly to madness by their environment, soldiers began questioning whether the strange encounters were real manifestations or merely the psychological toll of fatigue, fear, and isolation. The boundary between reality and hallucination blurred dangerously, leaving them trapped in a waking nightmare with no clear escape. In a desperate attempt to maintain their sanity, Captain Holland ordered a brief rest to regroup and steady their nerves. Soldiers huddled closely together, eyes scanning the mist anxiously, unwilling to admit aloud the terrifying possibility that the voices and apparitions might be more than mere illusions. With each passing hour, the whispering shadows grew more intense, more invasive. It became chillingly clear that the battalion was not alone, that an unseen presence, whether born of this forest or drawn to their vulnerability, was patiently circling closer, biding its time. And as Battalion 409 gathered what remained of their strength to push forward once again, every soldier silently feared the same unspoken truth, that the forest itself had chosen them, marked them for a fate darker than any they had ever imagined. Secret revealed. Battalion 409 pressed deeper into the dense and sinister forest, driven by an uneasy urgency. Their numbers diminished and morale severely eroded. Each step felt heavier, burdened with unspoken dread. Hours passed before they stumbled upon another abandoned outpost, hidden beneath a canopy of intertwined branches and cloaked in shadow. Captain Holland cautiously approached the dilapidated bunker, motioning his soldiers to follow closely. Rusted steel doors hung open ominously, creaking as they swung slowly in the wind. Inside, the air was thick with a musty scent of dampness and decay. Soldiers scanned their surroundings warily, flashlights illuminating walls scarred by frantic scratching and faded symbols, marks of desperate men driven to madness. In a corner of the bunker, Sergeant Grayson discovered a series of dusty files and journals piled haphazardly on an abandoned desk. Holland leafed through the pages quickly, his expression darkening with each line he read. The papers described disturbing experiments secretly conducted by Nazi scientists within Hurtgen Forest. Their aim, according to the hastily scribbled notes, was to harness supernatural forces, to control shadows and manipulate minds, an attempt to weaponize entities far beyond human comprehension. The soldiers stood frozen as Holland relayed these chilling revelations. Each man glanced anxiously around, realizing the horrifying truth. The unnatural occurrences they had experienced were likely connected to these twisted experiments. Their vanished comrades had perhaps fallen victim not to enemy bullets, but to something sinister, unleashed by mankind's own reckless ambition. Fear and anger warred visibly within the ranks. Some soldiers cursed bitterly, others whispered silent prayers, grappling with the implications of what they had discovered. Captain Holland himself felt a surge of profound dread mixed with fury. He understood now that their mission had never been a simple reconnaissance. Unknowingly, they had walked straight into the aftermath of a horrific, hidden experiment, now trapped, hopelessly entangled in a nightmare. This explains everything, Holland said gravely, his voice heavy with disgust and realization. We've been fighting an enemy we cannot even begin to understand. The realization settled heavily over Battalion 409. The soldiers knew now that their survival depended on escaping the forest grasp before becoming permanent victims of the shadows. They moved swiftly to exit the bunker, each man acutely aware of the oppressive darkness pressing closer around them, whispering ominously in the wind. As they emerged once again into the haunting gloom, every soldier silently acknowledged an unspoken, horrifying truth. Whatever force the Nazis had summoned had never been truly contained, and now it claimed the forest as its domain. relentlessly stalking those unfortunate enough to cross its path. Final transmission. Night descended once again, swallowing Battalion 409 whole. Each soldier felt the oppressive grip of darkness tightening around them, suffocating and relentless. Determined to send a final desperate plea for rescue, Captain Holland instructed Sergeant Grayson to attempt radio contact one last time. Grayson struggled frantically with the radio, twisting knobs and adjusting frequencies, desperation etched into his face. Static crackled, punctuated by distorted voices. Voices too familiar yet impossibly distant, echoing with anguish. Soldiers listened anxiously, hearts racing as they recognized the whispered names of their vanished comrades among the garbled transmissions. Suddenly, the static cleared momentarily, replaced by a chillingly coherent voice, strained with terror. They're everywhere. The shadows, no escape. Don't send help. The patrol froze, a cold dread descending upon them. That voice was unmistakably familiar. It belonged to Private Thompson, one of the missing soldiers. Yet he spoke as though trapped elsewhere, caught in an unseen horror just beyond reach. "Thompson," Grayson whispered incredulously into the receiver. "Where are you?" Only silence followed, then renewed static, harsher and more insistent than before. Captain Holland clenched his fists, forcing himself to maintain composure. He understood now that the shadows around them were not mere illusions, but something real and sinister, something that had claimed his missing soldiers and now sought the rest. The transmission had confirmed the worst. The patrol faced an enemy beyond human comprehension, an enemy born from darkness itself. Determined yet feeling hopeless, Holland made a final desperate appeal into the radio. "HQ, this is Battalion 409. Something is hunting us here, something inhuman. Do not send reinforcements. Repeat, do not send anyone else into this forest. Evacuate the perimeter immediately." His voice trembled with urgency and despair, fully aware that their survival was no longer guaranteed, perhaps never even possible. Yet Holland knew they had a duty to warn their comrades, to prevent further loss. He dropped the radio microphone, resigned to their grim reality. Immediately afterward, the radio emitted one final burst of chilling laughter, distorted and mocking, resonating with malevolent triumph before dying entirely. Grayson stared helplessly at the useless device, hands trembling. The soldiers glanced around anxiously, the eerie laughter echoing hauntingly through the trees, seeming to come from all directions at once. Holland, gathering what little resolve remained, addressed his men in a voice edged with steely determination. "Stay close. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. We owe that much to each other." As Battalion 409 braced themselves for the night's darkest hour, every man silently accepted the grim likelihood that this final transmission would be their legacy, a warning to those beyond the shadows that this forest was forever marked by something inexplicable, deadly, and undeniably evil. Search Party. Days later, unaware of the desperate warning from Battalion 409, Allied Command dispatched a rescue team into the Hurtgen Forest, intent on uncovering the fate of the missing patrol. Led by Captain Marcus Reed, a highly experienced officer respected for his bravery, the rescue party entered the forest cautiously, deeply wary of the ominous reports and fragmented transmissions they had received. As they retraced the patrol steps, they soon discovered unsettling signs. Equipment scattered haphazardly across the frozen ground, rifles discarded as if thrown away in panic. Helmets and personal belongings lay abandoned, half buried beneath freshly fallen snow. The scene suggested not battle, but sudden and inexplicable disappearance. Captain Reed knelt down to examine one particular find, a torn map identical to the one Battalion 409 had carried, stained with blood and marked by cryptic symbols. The realization sent a chill down his spine. The forest had swallowed them whole, leaving behind only eerie remnants and unanswered questions. With growing unease, the rescue team pressed on, deeper into the oppressive gloom. Yet every trace ended abruptly, footprints vanishing without explanation into the fog-shrouded trees. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, aware they were treading dangerously close to the edge of a mystery that defied rational explanation. As night descended once more, they established a perimeter, lighting small fires in an attempt to ward off the creeping darkness. But no amount of light could fully repel the sinister shadows gathering at the edges of their vision. Whispers carried on the wind that spoke their names, familiar yet twisted by something dark and unnatural. Private Evans, young and fresh-faced, suddenly jerked upright, eyes wide with terror. He swore he saw shadowy figures moving silently through the trees, spectral outlines resembling soldiers, gesturing desperately for the rescuers to follow. Captain Reed reassured him, attempting to dismiss it as stress and exhaustion. Yet privately he knew this was something far more disturbing. Throughout the night, similar sightings tormented the rescue team, shadows that seemed to mimic human forms, silently beckoning them deeper into the forest. Radios failed repeatedly, plagued by static and distorted echoes of distant screams, a haunting symphony of anguish echoing endlessly through the darkness. By morning, Captain Reed acknowledged the grim truth. Battalion 409 was irretrievably lost. The forest itself had claimed them, its secrets locked eternally within its shadows. With heavy hearts, the rescue party began their retreat, haunted by the knowledge that they had glimpsed something beyond comprehension, something lurking patiently at the border between reality and nightmare. Yet even as they withdrew, every soldier felt the lingering presence of unseen eyes watching them depart, the chilling certainty that they had narrowly escaped becoming the next victims of the forest's insatiable, spectral hunger. Modern-day echoes. Decades have passed since Battalion 409 vanished without a trace into the shadowy depths of the Hurtgen Forest. Yet even today, their mysterious disappearance remains unsolved, etched deeply into local folklore and wartime legends across Europe. The forest itself has never truly recovered from its haunted reputation, standing as a silent witness to events forever beyond understanding. Hikers who venture deep into the woods speak uneasily of strange encounters. Shadowy figures glimpsed briefly between the trees, ghostly whispers calling out names of long-lost soldiers, and an inexplicable feeling of being watched. Locals avoid the forest altogether after nightfall, convinced that something unnatural remains, eternally trapped within its darkened heart. One of the most chilling reports came from a young couple who wandered off the marked trail one autumn evening, lost and frightened. They claimed to have stumbled upon a clearing where spectral soldiers, clad in worn World War II uniforms, stood silently, staring into the distance as if trapped forever in a timeless moment. Terrified, the couple fled, never returning to that cursed place. Historians and paranormal enthusiasts alike have attempted to solve the mystery, yet each investigation concludes without answers, raising only more disturbing questions. Rumors persist that secret archives still hold classified reports of dark wartime experiments conducted by the Nazis within the forest, evidence perhaps deliberately suppressed to hide an unthinkable truth. Despite countless theories, the fate of Battalion 409 remains a haunting enigma, passed down through generations as a stark reminder of wartime horrors that transcend conventional explanation. Their story has inspired countless documentaries, books, and films, each retelling fueling public fascination, yet leaving the core mystery tragically unsolved. Visitors today can still see faded memorials at the forest's edge, silent tributes erected in memory of the vanished soldiers, names etched into stone, wreaths laid reverently, a solemn acknowledgement of those lost forever to the darkness. Yet standing there, beneath the shadowy canopy, visitors often speak of feeling watched by unseen eyes, as if the soldiers themselves linger nearby, eternally bound to the forest that claimed them. Ultimately, Battalion 409's mysterious disappearance has become more than just a wartime tragedy. It is a powerful testament to the unknown, the inexplicable forces that lurk just beyond the edges of our understanding. And as long as the Hurtgen Forest stands, their whispered stories will echo through the ages, chilling reminders of humanity's vulnerability in the face of mysteries that defy explanation. And so, we followed the final journey of Battalion 409, an entire unit that vanished without a trace in the heart of the Hurtgen Forest. While we've uncovered several theories, the true fate of these soldiers remains a mystery to this day. Were they victims of war, or did something far beyond human comprehension claim them? We hope this story has given you something to ponder about the hidden truths of history and the mysteries that may never be solved. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on more intriguing wartime tales here at Wartime Shadows.